This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
And welcome in, folks, to another edition of Open Mic Night. I am your host, Noah Taluki. And on today's episode, we have some bombshell news coming out of the Big Ten. UCLA and USC slated to join the Big Ten as of 2024, according to multiple reports. I'm going to talk about what this means for the Big Ten, because I'm not too thrilled about it, but I think I can kind of see the landscape of what college football is shifting to. So we're definitely going to talk about that, and also some Chris Ilitch and Avila comments. Of course, the Tigers, I know they swept Cleveland. A lot of people are happy about that, but there are some bigger picture things that we have to talk about with this team, especially with these very interesting Avila and Ilitch comments. So hopefully everybody had a great weekend. Recording a little bit late, like I've been doing the last couple weeks, just because of some scheduling conflicts, and also recording off of a Zoom call today because I ran out of batteries in my recorder. So apologize for the maybe a little bit less of a quality of sound rather than my normal mic, but just bear with me here for this 99th edition of Open Mic Night. But just like I've always been doing the last couple weeks, a little update from the Hall of Fame. Not too much this last week. Just been really relaxed. Just doing more research. Doing a lot more with Dick Vermeil and Art McNally, the referee who got inducted. So a couple interesting things. Art McNally, he's the first on-field official to ever be inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and there's in hockey, you have 16 officials. In baseball, you have 16 as well. In, basketball is 16. Or basketball is 10, yes. Basketball is 10. So the NFL is the last major Hall of Fame to put a referee in. If it's anyone, it's McNally. Art McNally was the head of the supervisor of officials in the NFL for over 20 years. He was also an on-field official for his first about 10 years in the league. And he's really the father of modern officiating. And when you think about officials in the NFL, I know as Lions fans, we always dog them. We say it's us versus the referees. It's us against the world. The Calvin Johnson catch against the Bears. The guys that pick up the flag, the referees who picked up the flag in the playoff game, the Brandon Pettigrew play, the game against the Falcons, 2017. We talk about how Detroit has always been against the refs and all that, but I think a thing too is you just realize that these guys are human. But really, McNally was the one who implemented so many different programs and trainings for these officials. I mean, this guy was nonstop working on trying to get these officials better and the game better and all of the rules. I mean, they would spend hours and hours and hours, him and his crew, dissecting plays from games. They would grade each official. They would write down each time that they what call they made, what point of the game, what they would grade for positioning. How is your mechanics out there? They would grade every little detail, just like coaches are grading players. McNally and his crew were grading officials. So it was really interesting to read about that, their whole process, and how these officials would spend 2.5 to 4 hours the day before each game looking at their individual tapes that McNally would make. And, he would make them for each official, all of their calls that they made, maybe 15 good calls, 15 bad calls. He would do different highlights from around the league as well. And he'd also put plays in there that probably there should have been a call, but there wasn't. So he was always trying to better the officials. And I think it's just important because these guys put as much time into it as the coaches and the players do when they look at film study and all that. So that was really interesting to learn about. Another thing about McNally, he was the father, they call him the father of instant replay. So the NFL was the first major league to really, at least in the United States, to implement an instant replay. And that was 1986. They tried it for a couple years. It went away, and it was back in the 90s. They needed a better way, but McNally was on the cutting edge of that. And when you look at, the rest of the leagues, they really followed suit of the NFL and what McNally brought to the table with different technology and instant replay and all that. So, and that's really changed, how sports is viewed today and how calls are made, especially now with player safety. That's a big thing that with replay and all that. And once the TVs came, once they started broadcasting their games on TV, that's what really when a shift to the instant replay had to be made because the TV audience had a better view than the officials. So they needed some way to do that. And so so McNally was on the cutting edge of all that. And, he was really instrumental in the 1970s rule changes as well. That really helped open up the passing game. So if there is an official to get in, the first official, it's definitely him. He's 90. He just turned 97, July 1st. So, hopefully he'll be able to make it. We're not still not sure yet. But definitely a true pioneer of the game that 100% deserves to be in the Hall of Fame as a contributor. And then, Dick Vermeil, of course, very emotional coach for the Philadelphia Eagles, led them to a Super Bowl, led the greatest show on turf in 1999 to a Super Bowl 34 championship, and also with the Chiefs. 3 different decades he had winning records with 3 different teams. Very, very impressive, his ability to adjust. And there's a bunch of stories of him being really hard on the guys and full padded practices twice a day. Now it's unheard of. These guys are barely in pads, it seems like, during training camp. They're always in shells or shorts or in their underwear, as Dick Vermeil would say. So I'm really learning about his technique, and I'm reading right now a lot about his Rams time. And just kind of like how he adjusted between his Philadelphia days. He just really emotionally wore himself out in Philadelphia. I mean, he was like getting 2 or 3 hours of sleep at night during the season. He would never leave the office building. He would always spend the night there. Whereas in St. Louis, 14 years later, because he took a 14-year hiatus because he was just so burned out, he was able to go home more and spend more time with his family and get away from the office a little bit more. Instead of having to emotionally drain himself. So, just it's really interesting to read all this. And, I've just done a lot of research on these guys with the new class, and it's been really, really fun to get to know more about these guys. That's for sure. All right. So that's my little weekly update from the Hall of Fame. As we're about a month away from enshrinement as well. So it'll be really exciting to see all those guys get in, and then the Hall of Fame game, Raiders versus Jaguars on, I believe, August 4th, that Thursday, first week of August. So want to get into it a little bit now. The big news coming from the Pac-12. According to a report made last week from a Pac-12 writer, UCLA and USC are joining the Big 12 as of 2024. It's going to really, really shake up this conference. I got to say this. So if you've listened to this podcast enough, I'm not really like a big college football fan. I don't talk about college football a ton on the podcast. I'm not really loyal to one school. I'm not really loyal to, now when it comes to basketball, I'm more loyal to Michigan State because I have Cassius connection and I love Coach Izzo. But I'm talking football here. And when it comes to college football, I really don't have an allegiance to a school. I root for Michigan. I root for Michigan State. Really, I don't like Ohio State, but everyone else I'm fine with. I kind of root just for the sport. And, when I have time, I watch college football. I watch on Saturdays and all that. I honestly love the NFL way more. That's another conversation to get into later, why I love the NFL more. But to me, what I like about college football, not necessarily the wide open offense and all that, like all the fun works of college football. I'm not necessarily that. What I love about it is the tradition, pomp and circumstance. How every school, every big school has their little tradition that they do. Their little walk outside, the rivalries with other schools. How many, the 100,000 people packed into these stadiums that, especially in the South, live and die and breathe football. And I really feel like in today's college football world that's just really been lost. And I think this move, reportedly, UCLA and USC moving to the Big Ten, I just think this is like another nail in the coffin when it comes to the college football, big time college football as a whole. I just really think they don't care about rivalries anymore. They don't care about tradition, because college football was always a regional game. Now it's become way more national, especially with the advent of television and all of these lucrative television contracts. The Supreme Court in the 1980s, shooting down a rule that, limited to regional coverage. Now, then you could go national. So once the 1980s came, that's when you started seeing more teams go to different conferences for more lucrative deals. The 80s kind of changed the landscape of college football a little bit, but now it's just going berserk. You've seen changes in college football with the transfer portal. You used to have to sit out a year if you wanted to play, and that was a lot less guys transferring. Now it's basically like free agency. You can leave and not have to sit out a year. And COVID changed that because, they were able to – I thought it was just going to be a one-year thing, but then, all of a sudden it's here to stay. So it's basically like free agency. Now you have the NIL stuff that, players can get endorsed for, endorsement deals and all that. It's really just starting to become – it's starting to have a more professional feel to it. It's starting to become more like the NFL, free agency, getting paid for your likeness. And that's not really what college football was about. College football was about representing your school, representing your team, embracing the tradition, embracing the rivalries. That's what I like about college football. And, you guys know I'm a big history guy. Of course, I'm interning at the Hall of Fame. I've learned a lot about the history of college football. I've watched a lot of documentaries on it, and I can just really tell how much rivalries and all of that mean. And I just think now with UCLA and USC joining the Big Ten, it's just kind of saying, the heck with it. The heck with these rivalries. The heck with the tradition. Tradition has always been college football as a regional power. Regional. Pac-12. Pacific Coast. Big 12. Kind of like the Southwest. Sort of like the old Southwest Conference. The SEC. The South. You had the Big Ten. The Midwest. Some of those, like the Big East, you had some of the Northeast schools at the time. It was all regional powers. Now, the Big Ten has expanded. In the last 10 years, they had Maryland and Rutgers come in. And in my opinion, it's been absolute jokes, especially on the football side. I think the main reason that Maryland and Rutgers came in was because of the television deals. They saw the Big Ten as an opportunity to cash in. The Big Ten also saw it, said, okay, we have a Washington, D.C. market in Maryland now. We have a market in New York City, New Jersey area with Rutgers. Problem is, those schools aren't really football schools. Yes, you have Rutgers, the first team to ever play in a college football game in 1869. Yeah, but outside of that, what football tradition does Rutgers really have? Now, they may compete in other sports, maybe field hockey or lacrosse or whatever, but we all know what the moneymaker is. The moneymaker is football. Why these teams switch conferences is not because of swimming, lacrosse, all that. It's because of football. And USC and UCLA coming in, football schools, UCLA hasn't been as dominant of a program consistently in recent years. Now, USC definitely has potential, I think. And gosh, they've been trying for years, ever since Pete Carroll left, to try to get back onto the national scene, because Pete Carroll was really the last coach at USC to, in the 2000s, to really have USC on the national level. And of course, they had all the scandals with Reggie Bush and all that as well, that kind of, I think, ruined the program to a certain extent. But they're trying to get back up there. And I think with Lincoln Riley as head coach, they could. Lincoln Riley, a great recruiter, obviously has a great offense. Sunny California, great for recruiting. I think he's going to, and I know USC fans and media has been saying this for a long time, to get that swagger back at USC. I think Lincoln Riley is the best chance that they've had at that since Pete Carroll. So you take all these factors into play, and you think, okay, So if the Big Ten is really going to do this, at least you're going to have some quality with USC. Maybe, some potential quality with USC. UCLA, I don't know. But I'm not, like I said, I'm not really a fan, but I think the future of college football, especially when Oklahoma and Texas decided to join the SEC, you think of regional powers. If SEC wants to take in Texas A&M, go ahead. Texas is a border state to the SEC. If the Big Ten wants to take in Notre Dame, fine. At least they're regional. USC, West Coast, UCLA, West Coast. Now you're coming to the Midwest. It doesn't make sense to me. But if they're going to do this, some rivalries are going to have to give. The old Oak and Bucket or whatever it is, Purdue versus Minnesota versus Wisconsin. I don't know if some of these smaller rivalries are going to exist anymore. I just if one thing, you maybe solve one problem, maybe getting a little bit more competitive with some teams, but at the same time, you kind of kill some of these other games. You can only play a certain amount of games in a season. So I don't know, I don't know the cash details and all that, but I definitely think USC and UCLA are trying to cash in, and they see that college football is changing, even after 100 years of tradition in the Pac-12. And who knows what's going to happen with the Rose Bowl now. And I've been a big traditionalist with the major bowls, but now that's been ruined because of the playoff. Rose Bowl, you're going to have what? What if you now you're going to have, say USC wins the Big Ten, you're going to have USC versus, it's just like a Pac-12 game all over again. It's really interesting. I know a lot of people aren't thinking about that Rose Bowl like that, but and it's going to happen in 2 years. And who knows what it's going to mean for the other sports? Is basketball going to join in? Is lacrosse? Is all these other sports, are they going to join forces, or is this just a football thing? But it seems like it's going to be big-time college football, SEC, and Big Ten. This is just another nail in the coffin. I mean, at this rate, might as well go get other schools, Stanford, Oregon, having all these other major programs just split into two. I mean, I don't know if it's going to get any better, but we'll see. I just think college football is starting to become these two major conferences. So Big Ten, and you either got to join the Big Ten or join the SEC, and that's it. So these two super mega conferences, I just think it ruins the tradition. I think and a lot of it, I think, is money based. Who has the best TV deals? Who can get the most money for the schools? It's just, I think that's kind of what's ruining college football a little bit, is that, and then you have the whole NCAA problems, and it's not good. If they want to do it, you might as well go get some other schools that at least fit that West Coast, Stanford, Oregon, Washington, one of those schools to fit that, to fit in, I guess, more with what the Big Ten is trying to do. Now you got an LA market, so you have Chicago, you have New York, you have the top three markets in the country now. You have Chicago, Northwestern / Illinois, you got Rutgers, New York City, and then now you got two teams in LA. So cash is flowing like crazy over there at the Big Ten and the Big Ten Network. That is for sure. All right. Before we end here, I want to talk a little bit about these Chris Ilitch and Avila comments. Tigers sweeping Cleveland this week, but they're still over 10 games below 500. Now, Chris Ilitch spoke. And, I'm not really a big Chris Ilitch fan. Now people are starting to say that this guy is worse than the Ford family, which, I never would have thought in a million years that someone would be saying that the Ilitch family was worse than the Ford family in terms of Detroit owners. But Chris Ilitch saying that he's very pleased with the club's progress despite their rocky start. I'm very pleased with the progress with the Tigers. Despite a very slow start this season for our team, there's actually some good progress happening with some of the young guys that have come up and developed, and so on and so forth. Chris, I get what you're trying to say. I get some of the pitching prospects have been good this season. I understand. But what was the main problem that you guys were trying to address this season? It was hitting. Who's come along with hitting? Oh, Riley Green. Riley Green? How about, did you forget about Torkelson? We got more news on Torkelson later, but I just don't know if you can say that. Very pleased. I mean, I get some of the pitching prospects are doing well. I get it, but when you are that far out of 500 and you had a team last year that won 78 games, people were expecting 80 or more. I said it on this very podcast that the Tigers were going to win 80 or more games this year. They were going to be at least 500 because I could see the progress that they were making last year. AJ Hinch is the manager. And what's happened? Traded Austin Meadows, or traded for Austin Meadows, gave away Isaac Paredes, who's somehow found his sweet spot in Tampa. This guy's hitting balls out of the park like nobody's business. They could never tap that potential out of him, and I think a lot of it has to do with player development. Very pleased, Chris Ilitch. Here's the other thing I was thinking about, too. Avila learned under Dave Dombrowski for decades. What did Dave do? I'm thinking, in the last 20 years, I can only think of 4 guys with the Tigers that truly panned out, that they truly developed in the minor league system. 20 years. Basically when Dombrowski was hired in 2001 till now. Justin Verlander, Rick Porcello, Nick Castellanos, and Curtis Granderson. That's it. Who else have they developed in their farm system that has been a consistent threat day in and day out in 20 years? We all know Dave Dombrowski was a good general manager. I think he deserves to be in the Baseball Hall of Fame one day. But Dave's philosophy was not necessarily building through the farm system. It was being able to make the big deal, going out and getting free agents, going out and getting veterans. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with that, I would say, as long as you get the right guys. And I think that was Dave Dombrowski's mentality, and I think honestly, I'm not trying to speculate, but Al followed him for decades. Maybe that's all Al knows. But Al hasn't really been able to get the big guys either. The biggest guy so far, Javi Baez, has done nothing in a Tiger uniform. So it just doesn't seem like it's working out for Al Avila, and I just think the writing's on the wall. I think this guy's going to be fired soon, and I think the public pressure is going to eventually get to Chris. I'm not saying it's going to be this year, but I don't know, maybe in the offseason, maybe next year. It's got to happen in the next year because this is really, really derailing with Al. And I just think a more competent guy with the Tigers could really help save this team. More Al comments as well. So they talked to him a couple days ago about obviously the status of the team. Says, obviously he's not too happy with the record. He's very angry, as a matter of fact, how things have turned out. We expected to have a better record, and we're working towards it. Okay. We've been happier lately, he added. He likes Riley Green's progress. The other thing, too, where the heck has Erod been? Eduardo Rodriguez took some time off a few weeks ago because of a personal matter. Usually those things just take a couple days and maybe a week and you're back with the team. But this thing has taken a long, long time. And, I want Eduardo to deal with what he has to do. But, man, you think the Tigers could have researched that maybe before they signed him? Maybe there's something going on with him that the public didn't know. Now all of a sudden he's just been absent. This guy was supposed to be the ace this year. I mean, what is going on? This guy hasn't showed up in weeks. They didn't do their homework with that. I'm telling you. He talked about the Isaac Paredes trade back in April. He said when you make a trade like that, you're not making a trade thinking we're trading a bad player for a good player. We acquired Paredes. We liked Paredes because, remember, they traded him. They traded for him, I think, back in 2017. We thought he was a good player. At the time, Riley Green gets injured and we're trying to win. We're trying to get a more established major league player that can impact us right now. It's not like we thought, oh, we're going to trade this guy who's not any good. No, we're trading a player and we thought was good for a player that we thought was good and established to help us now. I mean, it's been nothing but that for Meadows. I mean, this guy doesn't even have a single home run on the year, and this is a guy you brought in to have immediate power in your bat. You know, and AJ Hinch talked about this on the Stoney and Jansen show, how you're obviously not going to trade away a bad player because the other team has to get something in return as well. Oh, now that I say that, I think about the Astros trade and you know, Jake Rogers and all those guys. Perez, gosh, those guys haven't been anything. But you know, they obviously saw. And AJ Hinch was talking about this. They obviously saw positive qualities in Paredes, but they were never able to unlock his potential as a hitter, especially with that power. And all of a sudden, you know, he's producing in Tampa Bay. So something with player development. I'm telling you, I think something is going on. The Tigers need to do a better job, and I don't know what it is, but especially with hitters, you look at. Baez done nothing. Meadows done nothing. Spencer Torkelson, I mean, he has been a huge disappointment this year. I think this guy needs to clear his head. They may need to say, look, we got to send you down. Maybe they did. Maybe they rushed him a little bit. Maybe they were just so desperate for something that, you know, they says, we got to have you up now instead of maybe waiting a year. Get his confidence back in AAA, have him back up, finish the season strong. I think that's the best thing for Spencer Torkelson. I don't know why they're waiting for him, you know, to demote him. Guys, it's okay. It's okay to admit that you messed up. The number 1 overall pick. It's okay. You can send him down. We need him for the future. Some of these guys, they lose confidence early, and they're done. They're pieces of toast for the rest of their career. Spencer Torkelson cannot be that. And I think moving him down to AAA, regaining his confidence, regaining his swing, hitting more bombs, because that's what he's paid to do, hit bombs, because that's what he was drafted for. I think we could see a little bit more from him, especially if he gets moved down. So there's a lot of things that Chris and Al have to talk about. I appreciate how Al said it all starts with me, kind of putting a lot of blame on himself. Because I think, honestly, he's right. I mean, it does start with him. He's the guy that develops these players. He's the guy that brings in these free agents. He's the guy that drafts. So, you know, hopefully they could kind of get this season a little bit more on track so that we could finish strong and think about something for next year. But, you know, as of now, it's just been a complete disaster. Basically, Miguel Cabrera is the best hitter on the team. This guy's hitting 300 still. Not much power, but still able to hit those singles, and it seems like he's going to be an all-star this year because each team has to have an all-star representative. He might be the guy, especially since I always thought it was Tarek Skubal, but he's kind of fallen off the rails the last month or so. So I think honestly it's going to be Miggy because he's been hitting 300. He very respected. You know, he's on his last ride. So you know, it'll be interesting to see next week's all-star game and home run derby as well. Thank you again for tuning in to Open Mic Night today. I want to thank all of the wonderful people at the Detroit Sports Podcast Network, John Macaroon, Adam the Jock, all of them, really for allowing me to do this. Episode number 99, and I'm very excited for episode number 100 next week. Looking to get a couple guests on, so that'll be really exciting, and make sure to check out all their other great podcast content. Of course, Michigan podcast just dropped. Steve Dace has a lot to say about that UCLA and USC move to the Big Ten. Also, the wrestling podcast, Doc and Jock, and all the other classics, the Fan Report as well. So thanks again, folks, for tuning in. Be sure to tune in next week for episode number 100, reaching triple digits here on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. Thanks again, folks, for tuning in. Make sure to tune in next week, only on Open Mic Night.